Great.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us, Disruptive Technologists. Welcome to attendee to our fun and absorbing discussion on tech disrupts education. And we're super excited to have you guys here. We've got the slides up, and I'm going to go ahead, and you can find, just to let you know, if you can find these recorded webinars on the Disruptive Technologists YouTube channel by going to YouTube and searching for Disruptive Technologists in New York City. Then I just wanted to quickly thank our friends and supporters who have been with Disruptive Tech for the last several years. Although we aren't together in person, we still want to thank them and show our thanks. So we just like to appreciate all the people that have been here for all these years with us, despite the coronavirus. First off, I want to introduce our Scott Moss, our brand new website sponsor partner, who is making an upgrade on our new Disruptive Technologists website possible. Scott is an entrepreneur extraordinaire who you'll hear much more about during our from me. As Scott is also a panelist today and has some cool takes on education, including his latest Sidewalk College. And McCarter English, they are one of the oldest and largest firms in America with 400 lawyers with offices across the East Coast. And they've been with us for many years. David Soren, I always want to thank him because he's our chair of the Venture Capital Emerging Growth Companies Practice Group at McCarter, and they help people achieve their goals sensibly. He is also the chairman of New York City Disruptive Technologists Council, which is our eminent think tank group. And I want to thank Microsoft Reactor, who's been there for us for years. We used to have, if you're just joining us tonight for the first time, you'll probably know that we used to have our events quarterly at Microsoft until the pandemic. And they are neighborhood campuses where developer and startup communities meet, learn, and connect. They combine training on the latest technology, community meetups, and events with leaders in the industry. Reactors create an inclusive community for interaction and inspiration. So we always want to thank them, and we will hopefully be back there soon. We don't know when the pandemic's going to be over, but we always they were there for us. We want to be there for them. And of course, Zeotag is, they've always been our videographers. They've been there for us from the beginning, and they are amazing. They've been growing. They now have AI-powered videos that make searching and navigating the video content seamless. You can see their videos on our YouTube website. If you go to Disruptive Technologists, when you look on the YouTube site, you could subscribe to us and see all these webinars and podcasts of all our panelists, which we will be doing. After this, you'll get individual things about each of our panelists, which we'll do individually. And lastly, I just want to thank Hint again. They used to give us water they're our first sponsor. They've been our sponsor for 8 years, and they give us water every single event for 8 years. So thousands of people actually. And since we don't have in-person things right now, I still want to put a shout out to them. Their water's no sugar, diet sweeteners, calories, or preservatives water. And we look forward to meet again with everyone in person whenever possible. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and talk to you about our panelists. But first, the format, we have introduction and thanks. I just thanked you and introduced you, so that's done. Just to everyone who's out there, this is the first time I've done this without our regular moderator, who, because the coronavirus can't be here tonight, but I'm gonna take in for him. I'm the organizer of this organization, and I want to introduce the panel. I'm going to introduce the panel, and then if we have time, we'll have questions from the audience. But just so you know, we have a fireside chat in a week from now, and we'll answer any questions we don't answer tonight. So our next and then Oliver, who's our regular moderator, wanted me to give this disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed are those of the panelists and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company they work for. And he has a little note saying, please be nice. So, so far, everyone's been great. Anyway, the first panelist is Esther Dyson. She is the executive founder of Wellville, and she's focused on long-term thinking and equity. Her motto is invest in health and education. Don't just spend on care and remedial treating after damage is done, which is so sane. And she's also a board member of our new nonprofit. We became a nonprofit a month ago, Disruptive Technologists, and thank you, Esther. And our next panelist is Rick Willard, the founding and managing director of Agentic and Group and World Ethical Data Foundation. Agentic is a private international laboratory for adventure development, high philosophy thought experiments, and transcendent peer-to-peer cooperation. Their goal is to accelerate the current phase shift and facilitate purpose-driven technologies for digital value creation, social impact, and human agency. And we're thrilled to have him. He's super busy, glad to have, because he's global, glad to have him. Scott Moss, yay! Our first actual sponsor of our new nonprofit is helping us fund our new redo of our nonprofit website. Scott is an entrepreneur extraordinaire. That was my word, not his. And he's founder of a new venture called Sidewalk College. He's done a bunch of different things. So this is just very small, but Sidewalk College is founding this year. It's launching in October. And what he says is we're street smarts get an education, things they never teach you in a 4-year program. Basically, he said, if you give us 5 minutes, we'll give you a great lesson learned from sweet-seat executives with decades of business experience. And he also participates in numerous other investments, children's effort, and board positions. And then we've got Jim Williams, our one educator. I know this is tech disrupts education. We probably should have had more educators. I actually didn't think about it until after I'd already gotten some really cool people. And then I thought, oh, what cool person can I get as an educator? Jim is a physics and chemistry high school teacher at Scarsdale, which is one of the top 5 schools in the country, Union Free School District. Just full disclosure, he's also married to me, but he was actually a semiconductor equipment engineer for years and years in Silicon Valley. I'm from California, and he is too. And Jim career transitions into the family business, which his family was in teaching. And so for the past 18 years, he's been teaching high school chemistry and physics at Scarsdale. And last, we have Stan Rosenton. Super excited to have him on board, founder of Semper Curious and AI research at Stanford University. He has been active in intelligent systems research, ranging from machine intelligence to intelligent human networks in his capacities as director of the Artificial Intelligence Center at SRI. He's a consulting professor at Stanford and founder of several research-based startups. And he received his BA at Columbia University and his PhD at University of Pennsylvania. His latest venture, it's Semper Curious, which we'll hear a lot more about hopefully tonight, is a learning environment for inquisitive adults. And the last is Oliver Christie, who, like I said, due to the coronavirus, can't be here tonight. We love him. He's here every single time. This is the first event he hasn't been able to make. We usually have quarterly events at Microsoft. We have quarterly events on webinars. Thank you for being we support him and support everyone who's going through this coronavirus. So now we're just going to plunge into the webinar. And if you want to chat or you have anything you want to say, please feel free to do so. Mostly, if we don't answer your chats tonight, we're probably just going to answer them next week when we have our fireside chat, which is what we do. We just ask people questions tonight, and then we answer them during the fireside chat. But if we do have time, we'll answer any questions. And I'd like to start off with Esther, put her on the spot. Esther, can you frame this for us? Why is this important? Why is tech disrupting education important?
You're muted, Esther.
First lesson, remember to unmute. I'd rather than frame it, I'd like to challenge it.
Thank you.
When, I'll always remember there's this ad that Forbes magazine did long ago, and I don't remember whether it was meant sarcastically or not, but it basically showed somebody with the top of his head open, and somebody was pouring knowledge into it. And, that is exactly what education is not. Education is more like, you start with a tree and then you create some branches and you put some stuff on the branches, and then you put more stuff on the branches, and some branches fuse and other branches crack open. Education is constructing mental models of things. It's not, it can't be poured in. And the challenge is, so that's one challenge. How do you turn education into a real process of learning, of constructing mental models, exciting curiosity, and then helping someone to fulfill their own curiosity, not stuffing them with facts. But the other challenges in this world, and as we're seeing this economy and this society riven by racism and inequities and everything else, how do you make sure that this ability to get educated is more evenly distributed? Because it leads to everything else. It leads to jobs, it leads to income, it leads ultimately to the ability to live a life that lets you develop health and resilience. And with luck, it leads to the ability to elect good leaders or to become good leaders, which is a really important thing right now. And the challenge is that creating standards, just having textbooks, that does not provide education. And so our challenge today is to figure out what does, both for children and then for adults, because if when you stop learning, you might as well stop. So I'm going to stop.
Okay. Just to do something totally off the wall, let's go to Sidewalk College and Scott, because he has an idea of teaching. You could teach people in 5-minute increments. Just go for it, Scott. Tell us about yourself and that idea.
Well, let me tell you real quickly my experience with education. I grew up in Minnesota. I went to the University of Minnesota. My second year at the University of Minnesota, I was in a law class, and a business law class, and I got into an argument with, let me back up a little bit. I was already on probation, academic probation. I had failed a class I actually never attended, and I forgot to drop it, so I ended up with a incomplete in that class, so I got put on academic probation. Was in a business law class. I got into a heated discussion, shall we say, with a professor, and I got thrown out of the class. Needless to say, just so everybody's aware of this, I was right in my argument.
Of course.
I shouldn't have, but needless to say, I shouldn't have said anything, and that's my own fault. I got thrown out of college at that point. I actually went home that night to tell my parents, and I walked in, and my parents are having dinner with very good friends of theirs, and the wife there, who absolutely adores me, she was on the board of directors, she was on the board of governors of the University of Minnesota at that time. And I was sitting there going, this is great. I'm going to get back into school. She adores me. She'll get me right back in. And I told her what happened, and she looks at me and says, school just may not be for you. And I left the room. I was completely, there were no words that could explain it. I went I left the house and I went back to my place, and I'm sitting there going, this is not how that was supposed to work. Needless to say, I then went and started a number of businesses over the years. I grew 3 of them to well in excess of $1 billion in revenues, and have sold all of those off. Decided to start Sidewalk College. And what Sidewalk College is trying to teach you something, trying to teach anyone a quick lesson in 3 to 5 minutes. It is not trying to teach somebody how to be a spreadsheet expert. It's not trying to teach somebody marketing, all marketing in 3 to 5 minutes. It's just one quick lesson. And so we've got a number of C-suite people who have joined me on this, who are, we're putting this all together. We have decided to revamp it a little bit by actually walking down a sidewalk while they give you their lesson. We're launching it later this year. And it's also kind of dovetailing into another part of Sidewalk College, and that is we're also doing quite a bit of venture capital on it, and people who have questions or have issues with money can come to us and look for it.
So it's kind of like a complement to the elevator pitch, the sidewalk lesson.
Absolutely.
It's exactly, I was thinking that's exactly what I was thinking. It's like the elevator pitch for our attendees who are going to be seeing this and who are seeing this now. I always thought, how can you talk about something in 1 minute in the elevator? So great spin on that.
Well, I mean, so I have a question. It sort of reminds me, you know, when you want to talk to your children about something difficult, whatever age they are, they're either too young, so it doesn't matter. They want to understand. It's, you know, the sensitive, usually this is the part about sex, or they're old enough and they will understand and you don't need to explain it. I mean, it's sort of like, if the lesson is going to be that short, the mind needs to be ready to receive it. How do you match the person and the lesson?
Well, let me say one thing first. When you said, how do you talk to your children? It's really easy. I just tell them to talk to my wife. I say, go talk to your mother. Okay. I can handle any problem out there. I've gone through literally everything. Kids are not, I mean, I've got two great sons. I can't handle that. Now, how do you get somebody ready for a 3 to 5 minute education?
Give an example, maybe.
Well, I mean, it's more so where you're going to go on and you want to see something. It's giving you one at a time. There will be archives also where you'll be able to look at all of them, but it's not like you're going to sit there and go, okay, today I want to understand how to treat an employee, or how to treat a boss. What should I do with that? It's not where you're looking up a subject going, okay, I want to know everything about marketing. It's just, it's one lesson per week, and that's it. So, I mean, if you're not ready for that lesson, if it's not of interest to you, I hate to say it like this, then that week is not going to be for you. Or you go back into the archives and look up something else at that point.
In this day and age with ADD for everyone, it's like almost seems better. It seems better to just do things faster, quicker. Jim, I know you're our one educator on board here who's actually a teacher, chemistry, physics. I know we need to talk about how tech is disrupting it. How can we make technology, what's your feelings on technology helping this whole process? I mean, Jim had to start school Monday in class, and half of the day is in class, half of the day he set up the basement. He's got a whiteboard and videos and all kinds of things going on for the other half. Tell us your take on education through tech disrupting education. What can we do better? What are we doing now? You're on mute. You're muted.
Sorry about that. The hard thing is there's a real dichotomy within education, especially within our district. for those who don't know the Scarsdale district, it's a very it's a wealthy neighborhood. The kids I don't have discipline issues. If I call home, things get resolved. Kids always show up to class. Kids, grub for points. It's a very different environment than a lot of my colleagues around the country. So it's a little bit of a different place. But one of the things that's a big conflict within the school building is screen time. And so right now we're doing this hybrid thing where I see some kids on Monday, some different kids on Tuesday. In the afternoon, I see a complete class together. And so it's very, very confusing. But what it all means is that these kids are spending a lot of time in front of a computer, either asynchronous learning, which they're supposed to be doing when they're not with me, or some of these kids are streaming in because they don't have the immune system to go to school. And then we're worried about they're spending too much time on the screen doing school that way. And then, we originally were going to do complete distance learning for the high school. The elementary schools we're going to do a in-person and at home kind of mixture. But the parents got upset and the school board caved, and in the last 3 weeks of August, we had to create this incredibly complex, confusing schedule to try and address the emotional, social well-being of our students who are now sitting in class with half of their classmates in a mask and 6 feet apart. They can't congregate. There's no, we don't serve cafeteria food any longer. They can't go to, study hall. They can't go to the library. So it's a really, really weird place. So what's disruptive about all this? We're trying to figure out what we can do. I mean, okay, I teach chemistry. New York has a curriculum for chemistry. There's the national standards for chemistry. We have no idea where we're going to be next week. We can't plan anything beyond 24 hours. And so the disruptive piece for us is just trying to get through the next day in a coherent way that doesn't just alienate the kids. So disruption right now, today Verizon had an internet problem through half of Scarsdale. So half of my kids couldn't access the class. So one of my big things is, trying to get people reliable, affordable, accessible Wi-Fi wherever, whether that be in their home, whether it be in the corner cafe, whether it be, somewhere. So I think from my perspective, if the kids can access the information, that's the first hurdle. And, in less wealthy communities, that prohibits a lot of kids from actually attending school. They just can't get access to, the online part of school that the pandemic dictates. So,
well, you're kind of a microcosm too, because a lot of kids go to school for lunch. In your school, there's no one who's on a lunch program. There's no one who's below the barrier.
Purposely kick them out of the building so they don't sit next to each other at lunch.
So they don't need lunch. So that's an even different thing.
They need lunch. They go home and get it, but they don't get it with their friends, which is really what they want to do. I mean, at the high school level, the primary draw for students is their friends.
Well, Rick, you have kids in public and private school, right? So you need to unmute yourself. When you get a chance, unmute your yeah. So what kind of challenges are the schools facing disruptive wise? Is there anything we could do better? You've got both. You've got the private and you've got the public in New York City, right? So how's that going?
Yeah. It's funny. My kids are older now, but when I was putting them through school, working in tech as I have since the very early 90s, really the late 80s, I chose a private school for my older daughter because they had it was a girls' school, private girls' school. It had a magnificent STEM program. And I had done some research saying that young girls did not get enough exposure to STEM. And this is now, we're talking about, the 1990s, right? so I purposefully put one in there. And then by the time 8 years later, my other one was born, my other daughter, Joel Klein from the public school system here, who's running stuff and really upgraded the public school system. And so I found a great public school for my second daughter, which also was focused on STEM. But I would say this, I mean, Jim's issues notwithstanding, which are deep issues, access issues are deep issues. What I really think is going on here, I was recently honored to be asked to be on the board of a charter school entity, a national charter school chain. I don't know about the details of education, but I certainly do know how tech can drive a lot of the skill sets needed to compete in this century and moving forward. And the kids that are going to school now are going to have to really attune themselves to that. And I have been a little concerned about the curriculum or the curriculi when it comes to that across the board. Esther will remember this, and some of you who are, well, we all look like a certain age, right? But in the beginning of the internet, it was about access in general to the internet, right? The digital divide is what it was called. And it was postured more in terms of urban as opposed to suburban areas, inner city or whatever, right? And that's not really the case by and large anymore in most industrially attuned areas. What is the case is the language of coding, and there's a massive digital divide going on there. Just because you can use something like Zoom doesn't mean that you can make something like Zoom. And digital value creation, I mean, value is going to reside more and more digitally. So I see education itself lagging behind that fact. However, on the good side, Jim may not agree with me on this, but I do think that this time of COVID is giving kids a chance to interact with the computer in ways that are essential to their day-to-day life, as opposed to being on TikTok or something like that, during their free time, and learning how to navigate this space in a way that all of us here find okay to do, but they'll go a lot further in the decades to come, and their lives will be more intertwined with this sort of socialization or socializing. So that's a plus side. On the minus side, having been in digital development for decades now, I realized we were trying to do some things with kids online many years ago, and ran into a lot of regulations about privacy and security, and just the notion of having these little minds in this place, being exposed to all kinds of data mining and targeting, and these kinds of issues that are not prevalent if you're watching, Netflix or anything else. You're learning, the masses of people are learning that we use this data in sometimes nefarious ways. I don't see a lot of that happening. So while the access is occurring, I think the security for children across the board has not been discussed at all during this period, and that's concerning to me. So I'm a blockchain guy, so everything to me, I'm that hammer, so all the nails have to do with authentication, privacy, security, et cetera, and value creation, so that's why I'm speaking in those terms. I think one thing that might help Jim and the school system in general, people like Jim, educators like Jim, is to gamify somehow the experience and bring people not further away from the web, but deeper into it so that they actually know about the inner workings of technology to prepare them better for what's going to happen when they're adults. I mean, that's my initial take on it. And one last thing, by the way, I'm a board member of the World Ethical Data Foundation. I'm not a founder. I'm a founder of Agentic, but I'm not a founder of WEDF. Just to clarify that.
Thanks. Just to, Esther, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to push back a little. It's great to know how to code, and it's useful, but there's literacy, history, economics, ethics, statistics. Mm-hmm. There's the world is not suffering from a shortage of technology. It's suffering from a shortage of common sense, of ethics, of, concern for people outside one's own circle. These are much more important ultimately.
Yeah, I don't consider that pushback at all, Esther. I think that's very much aligned. I mean, being on the World Ethical Data Foundation's board, we take that very seriously, obviously. And you're right. You're correct. It's coding. As we all know, is a language like French or Spanish or Mandarin. My younger daughter speaks Mandarin, and she knows how to code. So these are languages that they pick up, on their way to becoming educated. I think though that this immersion in the web and this. Does anybody remember Chris Whittle and the Channel 1 program that he had schools? Back in the 90s, he was putting TV sets, it was considered radical education, standardized curricula on television sets wheeled in to the class. And he made a fortune, he raised a lot of money doing it. However, it was a passive experience, right? And, watching TV all day is not my idea of being educated. However, kids now are able to use this technology to go deeper, to interact and more proactive about their education if their instructor, if their educator is adamant about that happening. And that in and of itself, Esther, I would argue, is a language of curiosity, the language of wanting to learn, and lifelong learning is a practice. So if we can get kids more immersed into their instruction, then I think that is at least some kind of plus in terms of preparation. All of the, Verizon going down and all those things, those are major minuses. And there are people without access, especially undocumented people, from what I understand, are using to go. They're using, jackpot or whatever fast food, Wi-Fi they can find in the parking lots of these restaurants just to get online and be able to learn. I think that's horrendous, of course. But for those of children who have it, then it's a great, I think, a great opportunity to dig deeper into their future, which is, we can't really explain where that's going to go. We think we may know in some cases 20, 30 years from now, but certainly this digital existence will be part and parcel of who they are. So they're going to move ahead of us fairly shortly.
That's an interesting take. I want to ask Stan, thank you for coming all the way from California to join us.
It was easy, just a click away.
And Silicon Valley. And give me your take. You have Semper Curious. First, tell me a little bit about Semper Curious, and then tell me about your take on tech disrupts democracy.
The tech disrupts education.
I mean,
so,
excuse me, everyone. That's our next one in winter. Tech disrupts democracy. I've been thinking about it. Tech disrupts education.
We've all got democracy on our
I know
minds.
it's like crazy with these debates and stuff. I can't even think about anything else. But education tonight. So
the starting point for Semper Curious is this: that we tend to lump together education. But when you get right down to it, education is really segmented into the different audiences, the different motives, the different subject matter, and so on. So it's like you can lump together music, but music is used for many things by many people. Sometimes you meditate by yourself to music, and sometimes you dance with others, and sometimes, you listen to classical music because you want to get the nuances of it, and so on. So, likewise with education. So we basically decided to focus on the lifelong learning part. And if you look at lifelong learning, what people consider lifelong learning, that too is a very mixed bag. Many people who think of lifelong education think of it in terms of improving their skills for the workplace, either getting a new job or getting a promotion or credential or just improving their skills and doing it something work related. Some people it's a leisure activity. It's something they do for personal interest. but similarly, it covers a wide range of things. It could cover, nutrition, gardening, playing the guitar, French, any number of things. So it kind of blends into hobbies and other sorts of things. And if you look at the offerings that are out there, it's really not that easy to find things that are well matched if your interest is specifically in academic areas, but with the motive being curiosity. So in other words, if the motive is a credential, then you can take a university course or something like a university course. If the motive is edutainment, you can find yourself a nice documentary to watch on, Discovery Stream or something like that. Get into a subject, but you're doing it for curiosity. Oftentimes those materials don't work that well. And when we talk to a lot of people and basically discovered that their activities cluster into several groups. One is foraging. They spend a lot of time on YouTube, a lot of time on Wikipedia, a lot of time reading articles and watching TED Talks and this and that. And it tends to fill up your time, but it doesn't really tend to be cumulative. In other words, it's really hard to learn a subject thoroughly that way. And if you actually say, you know what, I've been listening to all these TED Talks about quantum this or about, society or, primitive cultures and stuff like that, but I really want to understand basic physics because I took it once in 10th grade, but I forgot it all and I want to take it again. You jump onto, any of the free courses that are out there on MIT OpenCourseWare or Coursera or any of these places. And basically you get presented with a lot of videotape lectures of the same lectures that you had in college. And people run out of steam. So you have this kind of, this two modes of learning, and neither of which is quite satisfactory. You have the overkill of trying to do a kind of a traditional college level course online, delivered through video lectures. On the one hand, a lot of hours and a lot of detail, and it's really designed for people who are doing problem sets, who want to get a credential, who want to prove their mastery of the subject, and maybe they're doing it for job-related reasons. Or on the other hand, you're just, like, what is condensed matter? I don't know. Let me look up the Wikipedia article. And people describe that as, the rabbit hole to nowhere, because you just go click, 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 click until you hit a brick wall, and then you stop and you go up and do something else. So basically, the idea we had for Semper Curious was, look, let's treat this as something that actually requires more of a cultivation process, and it requires contact with live people, and it requires gradual development of curiosity in tandem with developing knowledge. We can't assume that just because you're a curious person in general, you're necessarily curious about that particular little detail of something or other. So going back to Esther's model, which I agree with 100%, that learning is really about constructing mental models. In order to put in the attention and effort required to build the next branch of that model, you need to be sufficiently curious and motivated about that specific thing, right? So another way of thinking about this, I don't know how many of you have done soldering, but when you solder something, you like heat up a tiny little area of metal, and then you apply the solder. If you apply the solder without heating it up, you get nothing. If you apply the heat and don't put any solder down, the whole thing will fall apart. So basically, you apply some heat, you apply some solder. Okay, it takes. Now we apply some more heat somewhere else, apply some solder, and it takes. So cultivating curiosity is a very gradual and painstaking thing. So the structure or the format that we're using is layered offerings to an audience of people who are in contact with peers and academic mentors who are looking at a particular subject. If they're at the early stages, it may start with something that's more popular interest, more relatable, but the intent is to start cultivating interest in core academic subjects, meat and potato stuff, economics, political science, philosophy, physics. We've chosen about a dozen of them, and the reason we chose so few, we weren't trying to create a big catalog of them. We're basically trying to construct be able to invest sufficiently in about a dozen major subjects where people have huge knowledge gaps. They just really don't understand basic things. But rather than just assume they're going to come in and want to know that, let's gradually work up to the level where they're curious about that, and doing it in small cohorts. So moderated small group discussions, blended learning, small segments, a little bit of sidewalk, a little bit of live online, So, but not on business topics, strictly on core arts and sciences, academic, not practitioner stuff, not things that you would learn in a professional school. So not business, not technology, not coding, not Python programming, not marketing skills, nothing you would learn in a professional school, just core arts and sciences, history, anthropology.
How does tech help you, or what could you use that
Okay. So tech is really, well, it's important. First of all, it's all online, so that goes without saying. That's just the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But the deeper part of it is, there's a lot of stuff on adaptive learning where you try to measure, and it's kind of like recommender technology on steroids, where you're trying to give people the next module that will advance their skill. And there's a lot of pedagogical theories about how do you create pathways for people so that they can reach the skill level or the mastery level that they need to in a certain subject by making sure that they've mastered the skills that new skill is dependent on. So that's generally called adaptive learning. And because it's done for the schools, and because it's all oriented around test results and institutional agendas and things like that, and K-12 mindset is, from the kids' point of view, they're there because they don't want to get into trouble and because they want to get a good grade and they want to graduate. From the school system's point of view, they want to be able to make sure that they're producing graduates who have a certain level of mastery of certain subjects. So it's very skill oriented and very much oriented towards demonstrating mastery to other people. And so these adaptive learning systems take advantage of that, and they're constantly measuring, what do you know, what do you know, what do you know? Hey, let's give you the next thing. But if you're in a curiosity-based world, you're climbing like a gradient. You're climbing like a hill in 2 dimensions, right? Your level of curiosity about something is alternating with your growth of knowledge. So you need to be curious enough to pay attention enough to know the next thing. But then there's certain things that you can't even be curious enough about them because you don't know enough to even be curious, right? So you're constantly administering doses of experience that would increase curiosity as well as increase their knowledge. But you're doing this in an environment which is designed not for people who are trying to demonstrate performance all the time. It's not about quizzes and tests and measurement of that kind. So there's kind of like a technological challenge for how to do that gracefully without destroying the experience of the people who are participating in it, letting them fully experience the social communication and the joy of learning and all of that, but still make sure that it's working for them. It's actually taking them someplace interesting. So it's an inference problem, it's a representation problem, it's a machine learning problem.
That's a total challenge. I want to, before we wrap up, we just so people know, we are going to do this 1 week from today, and we'll be able to take people's questions. But I thought there was one question that was kind of prescient for this time, and it was for Jim Williams. How does interaction with kids virtually compare to in-person settings? More or less questions? We're just curious about that.
Your average teenager is pretty intimidated to ask questions in a classroom environment. They're very worried about their peers and such. So as far as online versus in a classroom, in a normal classroom, once you gain the confidence of the students, once the students realize their peers are not going to say something, questions happen, and you can get a very lively discussion even in a high school level class. Online, I find myself, I am pointedly asking students, hey, so-and-so, what do you think about this? And a little bit more of me trying to draw them out. once you get the ball moving, the interaction really turns out to be not too different. Online, they can't see each other raise a hand, or they can't, they don't see those physical cues, so they tend to talk over each other a little bit. And so we're still building protocols and norms as far as how do you ask a question without stepping on somebody else. But the interaction, I mean, ultimately, the kids are curious. They want to know. So they will ask questions. You always have certain kids that they want to demonstrate their knowledge, and so they're always trying to ask questions, and they're trying to always try and impress you with how much they know. So those kids are there. The key is to try and get the other kids who have similar questions, and to also, one of the things we always deal with in education, there's fast processors, right? There's people who think fast on their feet, and those are the kids who always raise their hand first. And it's really important to slow them down and give the kids who think a little slower, a little more thoroughly, so they get a chance to express themselves. So, we have different strategies to try and address that in a classroom so that kids can participate at a level that they're comfortable with. But certainly we all have experience in a group setting around a table. There's a very different interaction than somebody standing in front of a room talking. But it's slowly starting to move. I mean, our kids spent from March until June looking through a computer screen at me. So they kind of figured that out last spring. And they kind of have that worked out at this point. So it's not terribly different, somewhat. But I think as time goes on, it'll get more normal.
So, Esther, what would you think would be normal? What would you think would be normal, good for kids to have tech-wise that they don't have now? You need to unmute.
They need an automatic unmute button. This is not probably what you were expecting, but I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor.
Wow.
And I would like to give one to every third grader.
Wow.
So that without politics or, boring school books, they could just understand the impact of food and sugar and stress on their blood sugar, and just get this visceral understanding of how their bodies work. Because given that health and resilience is one of the key challenges, it's like, I just think education that is real and practical, and a mirror is much more interesting than the best paintings of somebody else in a book. And it's both the thing itself, I think, would be incredibly valuable, but also that approach. Kids are curious. Let them understand stuff. Let them explore. Let them figure out how things work. I'm using this app, and they are mixing up percentage points and percents. I would love to have a third grader look at this app and say, hey, they mean percentage points when they're saying percent. And then the other kids figuring out what that means and understanding, if I'm 1% likely to die next year, and then I'm 50% more likely than that, I'm not 51% likely to die. I'm 1.5%, whatever. Just the more education can be relevant, exploratory, and not rote and not memory, the better. And there's all kinds of cool technology that does that. I mean, there's also fixing TV sets, or, constructing airplanes, or who knows what.
Cool. So Scott, how do your sidewalk college people, how are they gonna get their information from you?
Are you saying how are they going to disseminate it off our website? Or?
Right. Oh, is that how they're going to go to college? They're going to go on your website?
Yeah, they're not going to over this, whichever shoulder it is, this shoulder. They're not.
Shoulder.
They're not going to. They're not going to a brick and mortar location to hear a 3 or 5 minute discussion about how to.
Not going to walk down the sidewalk.
No, they could. I do see that constantly all day long, where people are walking down the sidewalk with their iPhone and watching something, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's all going to be web based.
So do you think that people will just come to the website to learn?
Well, we've had a lot of action on it. Just accumulating emails right now. The people that we've got on it are everybody from Rob Walton, who's the former chairman of Walmart, son of Sam Walton. I've got Tim Crown, Eric Crown. They founded a company called Insight out of Phoenix, an $8 billion computer hardware reseller. I've got Carly Fiorina, former, and I know her from her days at Hewlett Packard. I was one of the largest HP distributors in the country. I've got, God, I'm trying to think of who else. Quentin Lilly, the former president of Technicolor in California. I mean, I've got a lot of people that are very, very good and very big draws. And I'll say this very safely. It is a non-political. It's an easy place to go to learn something about a specific topic for the week.
So the website's the best way to get information at this point, as far as your company.
And the other thing is, it's also going to be a place if people are looking for true help, we can find them true help. I mean, whether and it may not be it's not a 3 or 5 minute discussion. It may be, where do I go from here? I've been doing QuickBooks on my company for 2 years and I've outgrown that, or I've outgrown my ability to handle that. Where can I go next? We can help them find people. We can help them find capital. We can do all of that.
And it's all through the internet.
Right.
Is your best source.
Absolutely.
And Rick, so as far as you're concerned, education-wise, what do you think would have been helpful for your children? What should they have had to help them more technology-wise, in today's day and age?
Right. First thing I'd like to say to Scott is that Sidewalk College reminds me of something my dad told me a long time ago. He said, one of the best educations you'll ever get is at UCLA, University on the corner of Lenox Avenue. So that just, it made me chuckle when I saw Sidewalk College.
Just a little note.
Nothing like what you're doing.
My mother always said, you should go to UCLA. I went to Berkeley. She was like, you should have gone to UCLA. It's just funny that
But okay, I'm going to go put my blockchain and token hat back on, because I come from, and I don't mention that much anymore, but my first work was in advertising. And so that's the business of persuasion. It's the business of, as Stan put, I would call it adaptive engagement, moving from step to step to step toward an outcome, a predetermined outcome. What I think, with watching my girls empirically over the years and being involved in various educational projects using blockchain and token technology, that there was about 20 years ago, this movement, maybe 15, 20 years ago, to give kids money for getting good grades. Now, I don't think that's a great idea. However, schools do work essentially on a graded point system, right? You get 100, you get smiles at home, you get rewards. You get a D, and you don't get that many rewards, really. You get a lot of censure, right? So we already work on a sort of point system. I would like to see some part of education, digital education specifically, that part of their education have multiple paths. It used to be called gamification, but it's really more about adaptive curiosity and adaptive engagement, to have multiple paths to learn how to fix those TVs, or learn how to mix these covalent, what is it called, a valent bond, and how does it then create certain substances or whatever. So I think that tokenization on the blockchain allows not only the security and privacy that kids, I think, need online more and more as this progresses with them, COVID or no COVID, this is going to happen, with an incentivized system that spurs their curiosity, not money, not cash, but some sort of redeemable point system that can say, get them, if they're interested in fixing TVs, let's say, it gets them a toolkit, or it gets them things. It doesn't have to be money. It could be something that directly aligned with where their curiosity is pointing them. And I think that that is something I'd like to see given the state of technology now. There's always a human element. I'm not trying to make cyborgs out of kids, but I definitely think that because I think that education is somewhat behind technology at this point. I went to a school called Governor's Academy in Byfield, Massachusetts, a secondary school. It's a boarding school in northern Massachusetts. And I had a teacher there who apologized to us in my senior year. And he said, I'm really sorry, guys, but he went to Harvard. He said, I can only teach you what my generation knew. I can't teach you what you're about to go into. And he meant it. Every teaching up until now has been a generation behind the actual facts of existence, right? Now it's in real time. And that, I think, calls for a different methodology in measuring and deploying education and different incentives that match where we are and what we're doing. Now that's heretical in many circles, and I know that, but it's more of the world that I live in and I see my kids growing up in. So that's what I would say. I think that we have the wherewithal to create enhanced models, incentives that still remain human without turning people into automatons.
Well, thank you. Like I said, next week we're gonna. It's Thursday, 6 o'clock. Go back to the meetup site, Disruptive Technologists in New York City meetup, and we're gonna have our fireside chat for 1 hour, 6 p.m. And you can ask questions ahead of time. You could send them to the organizer, who's me. Just hit organizer. Send us tons of questions and we'll answer them. I just want to have one more person who asked something, and I'm going to ask Scott. Someone just wanted to know what the website URL for Sidewalk College was. Do you have that?
We spent millions of dollars trying to figure that out. It's called sidewalkcollege.com.
Cool. Okay. So anyway, again, come see us on that. And everyone who's here will be there next week, so you can ask questions. Jeff, thank you for directing this. And Bruce, he's not live, but you can see his photo. He'll be collecting all the information, all the questions for the fireside chat. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.